What's up, everyone? So, give and take. There's a guy that I worked with, and he was former military. He had some things going on in his life, personal life. He had recovered from some things. He had gone through some things like we all do. But at times, our personalities would mesh really well, co working, and at times, they would absolutely just grind me to a point of just like, okay, enough of this guy. He had a knack to want to control everything, even though he had no authority or responsibility to do so. Now, a lot of it I willingly admit and readily admit that I appreciated it early on as I was learning my job and I was getting instruction in ways that even my trainers weren't giving me instructions. And as I grew and began to be competent in my own right at my job, he started to take on. It was almost like kind of like when you see like dogs in a pack, where he wanted to continue to assert himself as like an alpha or in a dominant position, even though he had no more power than I did as an employee. It would be little things. What are you doing? What do you got going on? Or, things like that. And it's just like, sir, why does this bother you, or why does this concern you? But when I stopped and really thought about it, there was never a point where I really thought that it was mean spirited, where I thought that it was coming from an absolute place of trying to keep me or anybody else like under a boot heel. And then when I thought about it more, I realized that as much as he would want to take from you, as in the form of like knowledge, like what do you got going on or what's up, he would give that much too. He would give the amount that he would take. And that's was kind of like a aha moment for me. It was kind of like that moment of clarity. There was like an epiphany to that, where it's like he's only being himself, but he's being himself really all the way around. So for example, if he was going to lunch, he would kind of rattle off all the things he'd done up to that point, and then he would go to lunch. Or if he was standing and doing something and there was, a lot going on, he would tell you all the things that he had completed or what needed to be completed. So he was really a strong link in the chain when it came to that. And all he was doing by, asking other people around him what they were doing and things like that, was really just continuing to keep the chain moving. And that was kind of a vital awakening, because a lot of times we can take things wrong if we don't really stop and think about it. And the more I thought about it, I realized, when we think we know a lot, we really have to assess ourselves, because we don't know nearly as much as we think that we do. And even when we're competent in our jobs, there's always, at least in my field, there's something that could always be learned, because it's never the same thing twice. So I say all that to say, sometimes what we look at as far as people taking from us, do they give it as well? Do they give as much as they take? Because sometimes we don't look at it because we feel like we're just always giving, but the receiving part is easy. I was receiving this information, and sometimes I was, kind of just brushing it off like, yeah, okay, go to lunch, or yeah, that's what you got going on. And it wasn't to dismiss it, but it was like there were points in time where I also was very aware of what was going on in the room or what needed to be accomplished, but he was still willing to do that. And that's the mark of, in a lot of ways, a good teammate. Somebody who's willing to not only get the ball when they ask you to pass it to them, but they're willing to pass it back. And that made my appreciation for my circumstance grow, not just with him, but with the job all the way around. But it also kind of takes a little bit of that weight off of that sits on our shoulders sometimes. Sometimes go into your job and you think, I don't want to have to deal with this or this person or whatever else. And then when you realize, like, this is just kind of who they are. And the part that I'm really grateful for growth over the last 5, 10 years, I mean, we're always growing, but real growth is the levels of acceptance. Once I accepted one, that I wasn't this super employee, and I never thought that I was, but once I accepted knowing that, okay, I really don't know as much, I benefit from him kind of hovering at times where it's like, yeah, because I might have actually had a question. But I also benefited from the passing of knowledge. So as much as, again, he would ask me to pass him the ball, he would pass it back. And a lot of times that put me in a position to score because it would draw things to him. If you think of it like basketball, if you give the ball, a lot of times one or two defenders will go over to that person. And if we're putting it in basketball terms, he's a better shooter than me. So things may have gone over to his way to keep him kind of more occupied, which freed me up to do something easier like a layup rather than having to shoot like a 3-pointer or something. You know what I mean? Acceptance was a big part of that. And that was something that started within. It wasn't for me to just accept, oh, okay, that's who he is. It had to start with me accepting that I needed the help. I needed to be able to rely on this person and other people as well. And they all were great, have been great, and will always be great in my mind for the help that they've given. When learning was, and we're always learning, but real learning, training, things like that are going on. But what I took from it, again, was something that I had came in with, which was the ability to accept, my shortcomings. I don't want to be perfect. I hope nobody does want to be perfect, because that seems like a miserable existence. If everything was right, if every dart you threw hit a bullseye and you knew it, if everything you did, if every step, if nothing, I just don't feel like you learn as much. I think you have to learn from being able to miss the dartboard. You have to learn from being able to take that misstep and trip on that crack in the sidewalk where you do that awkward step forward. Those are the kind of things that wake us up and keep our eyes open and keep looking around us and learning from the world around us. There's lessons everywhere. Like I always tell my daughter, I've said it before, she likes to, when we go to the grocery store, she likes to take the little scan gun and scan all the groceries. And I always tell her, like, your brain is the computer, your eyes are the scanner, and the world is a barcode. There's a lesson everywhere if you look, and may not translate into a whole lot, but your brain is still taking in this information, and information will go to knowledge, and knowledge effectively used will ultimately become wisdom. And so we want to keep knowing things that are going on around us, and not just around us. It should start within us. So that's my thoughts on this. What are you guys' thoughts when it comes to something like this? It was just one of those things that I wanted to be able to share, because as these things come to me, maybe, just maybe, somebody else has experienced it, somebody else is experiencing it, or somebody else will experience it. So it's past, present, and future. But as long as it's something that somebody can reflect on, or understand in the moment, or almost be prepared for, then I'm always happy to share things moving forward. So just look for knowing that acceptance is a good thing. It's not a weakness to say, like, I had to bend to the will of this person or anything else like that. And just keep growing. That's the one thing. Keep learning from things around you, because one day, who knows, you might be looked at as the one who's, seemingly being a little overbearing. And hopefully somebody will finally realize that what you're doing is really covering them and covering yourself in a place of employment, or whether it's financially, whether it's romantically. Like, we can always help. And with more knowledge, it benefits everyone around us. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on something like this? What's your ace up the sleeve? Advice, comment, experience? I'd love to hear it. And, subscriptions to the channel are free. So I hope this finds everybody in your place, pursuit, or beginnings of total health, mind, body, and soul. Peace, love, unity, solidarity. And as always, subscriptions and videos. So stick around.